Hi everyone, welcome to this video on mechanical advantage. This is one of those topics that I know people struggle with. A lot of us sign up to study PE and phys ed and sport, and then when it comes to mechanical advantage, we find ourselves doing physics and maths. But it is really helpful in getting to grips with human movement and biomechanics. So let's try and break this down and get our heads around it. Let's get started. Well, we've talked about lever systems before, but a lever system is a kind of very basic machine which converts one type of work into another. In our case, we're talking about the levers of the skeletal system converting the work of the muscular system into force, movement, and so on. But how does this all happen? Well, let's start with power as the input into the system. For us, this is going to be the effort generated by our contracting muscles. That work is then converted or transformed by a lever or the lever system of the skeleton. Now, depending on the setup of the lever system, which we'll come to in a moment, that power input is either amplified in the direction of increasing force output or in the direction of increasing the speed output. Now, strictly it's velocity, but never mind that for now. But it can't do both. This transformation amplifies either in the direction of force or in the direction of speed. And there's always a trade-off in any simple lever system between force production and speed or velocity of movement produced. You can't have it both ways. Now, if the effort or the input in the system is converted by the lever to amplify the force on the load, that lever is said to have mechanical advantage. So a lever with mechanical advantage is useful for moving heavy loads, but it comes at the cost of speed of movement. Conversely, if the power input at the location of the effort on the lever or in the lever system, if that's transformed by the lever to amplify the speed of the movement of the load, then the lever is said to have mechanical disadvantage. And a lever with mechanical disadvantage is useful for moving quickly, but its disadvantage is that it comes at the cost of a loss of force output. Now, I said just now that the balance between force and speed output of a lever system depends on the setup of the lever system itself. Is it a first, second, or third order, first, second, or third class lever? What's the relationship between the load and its location in the lever system, the effort and its location, and the location of the fulcrum around which the lever pivots? So what we're going to do is we're going to think about this in the context, just for now, of a first class lever, and we'll talk about second and third class lever systems in another video. But let's understand how this works for a first class lever, and we can apply that knowledge later on. So here's a first class lever. We know it's a first class lever because the fulcrum is in the center. Now before we move on, we need to define a couple of terms here that's going to help us work out mechanical advantage of a lever. We need to define the parts of the lever arm. The terms we need are load arm and effort arm, and this is really quite simple. The part of the lever system between the fulcrum and the load is called the load arm. That's between the fulcrum and the load. So F to L on the diagram. The part of the lever between the fulcrum and the effort is called the effort arm. So that is from the F to the E on the diagram. So we have the load arm between the fulcrum and the load. We have the effort arm between the fulcrum and the effort. That's it. Okay, that's the easy bit. The key thing to remember to work out which is the load arm and which is the effort arm is we always go from the fulcrum. So from the fulcrum to the load, that's the load arm. From the fulcrum to the effort, that's the effort arm. So let's build another layer into our understanding now. As we've already seen, the terms mechanical advantage and mechanical disadvantage are ways of describing what happens to the input into the system. If force is amplified, we say that the lever has mechanical advantage. If speed is amplified, then the lever has mechanical disadvantage. But we want to know, what is it about the setup of the lever that produces these outputs? How do we know if our lever will have mechanical advantage or mechanical disadvantage? Well, it all depends on the relationship between the load arm and the effort arm, which we've just defined. Each lever has a relationship or a ratio between the load arm and the effort arm that causes it to either amplify the force or amplify the speed of movement, but not both, just one or the other. So, to calculate mechanical advantage, we need a really simple equation. Mechanical advantage equals the length of the effort arm divided by the length of the load arm. So let me say that again. It's nice and simple. Mechanical advantage of a lever equals the length of the effort arm divided by the length of the load arm. Now, as a quick aside, you will see some textbooks and experts referring to mechanical advantage as load divided by effort, and others defining it in the way that I've just defined it as effort arm or length of effort arm divided by length of load arm. And it's just because of the wonders of trigonometry, which we're not going to get into. It's trigonometry that means it's possible to use the length of the effort arm as a proxy or as a stand-in for the load, and the length of the load arm as a stand-in or a proxy for the effort. Now, although they're different mathematically, in practice, those are interchangeable and equally valid methods, and I'm going to be sticking with the first of these for simplicity's sake. So I'm going to stick with mechanical advantage equals the length of the effort arm divided by the length of the load arm. So here's the key teaching point for the session. Here's a first class lever. We know it's a first class lever because it's got the fulcrum in the center. The fulcrum in this example is much closer to the load than to the effort. Therefore, in this case, the load arm is shorter than the effort arm. So using our equation that we've just seen, if we divide the length of the effort arm by the length of the load arm, we're going to get a number that is greater than 1. And this means, or this indicates, that the lever system shown here on the left has mechanical advantage because the effort arm divided by the load arm is greater than 1. As a consequence, we know that a lever set up like this will produce an amplification of force acting on the load, but will not produce an amplification in the speed of the movement of the load. It has mechanical advantage. Here's a second example. It's also a first class lever because the fulcrum is in the center. It's in between the load and the effort. However, this time the fulcrum is far closer to the effort than to the load. So the effort arm is much shorter, the load arm is comparatively longer. So if we divide the length of the effort arm by the length of the load arm in order to work out mechanical advantage, we're going to get a number that is less than 1. And so this lever system is therefore at mechanical disadvantage. So a lever system like this will not be able to amplify the force acting on the load. So only a comparatively light or low load can be moved, but it will be able to move that load more quickly than the movement that's occurring at the position of the effort. So the final thing to note here, and we're not going to go into detail on this video, but we'll do so in the next video, is that the larger the ratio between the length of the effort and load arms, the larger that ratio, the further the number, the mechanical advantage, moves away from the number 1, the greater the mechanical advantage or disadvantage. Now, we've only looked at this in the context of first order levers, but this has just been to help us get an understanding of the concept before we then go on and complicate matters. So do keep an eye out for my video on how mechanical advantage differs according to class or order of lever. So that's all for this video. Please do like it and subscribe and hit the notification icon. Please put any thoughts and questions in the comments section, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care for now.